Okay, I think we're live.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's Emily with Keep Pearland Beautiful. Thank you for joining us tonight for our September garden lecture series in partnership with the Brazoria Master County Gardeners and the Texas A&M Agrilife Extension. Tonight we have Kimberly Mayer here, and she's going to present on Tree Planting 101. And so here's her presentation.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you for having me back again. And howdy, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Keep Pearland Beautiful's Facebook Live. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Kimberly Mayer, and I am the horticulture agent for Brazoria County. My job with Texas A&M Agrilife Extension is to work alongside the Brazoria County Master Gardeners and to provide high quality educational programming on all aspects of horticulture. And if you've heard me speak before, you hear me say that we teach on things like trees, turf, and tomatoes. And so today we're actually going to be covering the basics of how to properly plant a tree to ensure that it has the greatest chance of survival. Because that's what we want, right? We don't want to plant a tree and have it decline and not do well for us. If we're going to go to all that effort, we want it to have to grow big and strong for us. So here we are, all online and virtual, but I bet you're wondering, how do trees access the internet? Well, they just log on. So maybe you need a quick snack before we get started. Go right ahead and grab that. Did you know what trees like to snack on the best? That's Twix. And they're one of my favorites too. They grab them from the pantry. Okay, we'll stop with the tree puns for now. But I will warn you, there are more tree puns coming throughout the presentation. So I hope it's not too unbearable for you. So right now we are coming into the best time of the year to plant trees, which is fall. And so I hope this can be a refresher course in some of the best practices for planting trees. This is also a really good time for this reminder because so many of us may have had damage to our trees or lost trees after Hurricane Beryl. And so a lot of us are looking into replacing our trees in the landscape. So what a great opportunity to talk about Tree Planting 101. So you might be wondering, what are some of the benefits of planting trees? And there are quite actually, there's a lot of them. Trees provide benefits to you, our community, and to our environment. So if you really want to do something green, plant a tree. And it's been shown that trees that around your home can actually increase its value by up to 15% or more. Planting trees also removes carbon dioxide from the air. Plus, trees produce oxygen and they give our beautiful birds and songbirds a home. They also provide a lot of other benefits. They produce food and for our wildlife. Trees that are planted on the east and west of your home can actually cut cooling bills from 15 to 35%. So lots of great benefits that planting trees provides to us. And it's been a pretty hot summer, and some of our more developed areas of the state can be blamed for the exasperation of that. These, more urban areas can often experience higher temperatures than some of our rural areas when our green spaces are replaced with roads, parking lots, and large buildings. Because those large buildings, all that concrete, it retains a lot more heat during the day than our natural landscapes. And so these microclimates of these really developed urban areas and cities are known as urban heat islands. And they can be actually 20 degrees warmer than some of our areas with green space. Those urban heat islands promote higher daytime temperatures and they reduce nighttime cooling and increase air pollution levels, which all can contribute to heat-related deaths and heat-related illnesses. There is good news, however. The solution to some of these effects of urban heat islands may be as close as your nearest tree. You can see on the slide there that shaded areas of some of these urban areas in comparison to unshaded areas can actually be 20 to 45 degrees cooler. I know that some of you have, been outside walking through a park or somewhat and somewhere, and as you get under the canopy of trees, it feels cooler. So surely some of you have felt that difference. And so these are all some great reasons to get started planting those shade trees in your backyard, your front yard. The trees are literally, they can make us cooler. So let's branch out a little bit and talk about our tree root systems. It's actually quite unbelievable. So one myth that I want to correct before we get too far into this presentation is about the root growth of most trees. Most of us have seen the graphics online of a tree outline above the soil surface, and then it's got a mirror image of the roots right below it. And that growth habit for tree roots is just not accurate. A tree's root system is actually about 18 to 24 inches below the surface of the soil. And the diameter of those roots can actually be twice the size of the tree. So if you look at the photo on this slide, you can actually have a 20-foot tree and the root system will possibly extend about 40 feet in all directions. And so it's important that we kind of change our thinking and make sure that we understand where the root system is on these trees. It's important to take that into account because you need to think about these things even before you plant your tree, especially as you're digging, as you're fertilizing your lawn. That root system can actually take up the fertilization from your lawn. If you have roots that come up to the surface of the soil and you're needing to maybe cut back or remove some of those, it's important to understand where that entire root system might be on the tree. And really, on top of all of that, the most important thing is to make sure that you choose the location of the tree, a good location of the tree that you're about to plant. Make sure that you really think about that and plan that out. And so some of these next slides take all of those things into consideration. And these slides are from these are photos taken from our Texas A&M University the Forest Service website. And you can find that at texastreeplanting.tamu.edu. I think I have this information on our very last slide with some other tree resources. But again, that's texastreeplanting.tamu.edu, like education. And so this website has some really great visuals for you to prepare for planting trees in your landscape. So if you take a look at the photo on this slide, there are some minimum planting space requirements depending on what size of a full-grown tree that you'll be planting. So you have to take that into consideration too. You may be purchasing, a 3 or 4 foot tree from the nursery, but you have to think about how large is this tree going to get? It is a small tree that only gets about, 20 feet high or so. That small tree is going to require at least 60 square feet of space. So think about that. If you look at that little, if that scale there, medium trees are going to need about 120 square feet, and your large trees are going to need 180 square feet. And so that's important to do a little bit of research and see exactly how big the tree will get by the time that it's fully mature. And make sure, from there that you choose your space and pick your tree accordingly. So here's another slide from that same website. You can avoid a lot of the problems that people have with trees before planting. Again, just on making sure that you choose a good location. Some of the things that you want to keep in mind is that you want to avoid blocking visibility. You don't want your tree to be out by the sidewalk, especially if you have a house on the corner where you've got a stop sign there. It's important that you don't block those traffic signs or street corners. That can be dangerous to traffic. You don't want to place trees too closely together. Those trees, like we just saw in the previous slide, have quite an expansive root system, and they need that room to be able to take up nutrients and water and oxygen well. And so you don't want those trees placed too closely together. It's also really important to avoid planting too close to a sidewalk, to your driveway. If those roots get big enough, they can impact those areas. So again, make sure that you check out this texastreeplanting.tamu.edu and do your homework, do a little bit of research before you just go out and buy a tree and decide to plop it in the ground. So here's one more, something that you may be familiar with, especially after we've had storms and had our electricity out. And so think about, again, how large is that tree going to get? If it's going to be 40 feet or taller, you want it at least 50 feet away from power lines. And you can read there on the screen if you're planting a medium-sized tree, something that's less than 40 feet tall, they need to be at least 20 feet from the power lines. And then of course, if you have a 20-foot tall tree or less, that's something that where you can plant one of those smaller trees and not have the utility company come out and prune those trees. It may end up looking something like this. I know we've all driven down the highway or through our neighborhood somewhere and seen where the utility company has had to chop and prune a tree to make sure that it's not affecting the power line. So, take the initiative and try not to plant those trees where the power lines are. You don't want to have to suffer with that with that power line haircut. That can be awkward. All right, so now that we've done some pre-planning for the location of our tree, and we are ready to start digging, the first thing that you want to do is call 811 before you dig. If your backyard is anything like mine, you may come to find out that your backyard is the one that half of the utilities run through. And so those utility type lines need to be marked before you start digging, and you'll want to avoid digging in those areas that the 811 people have marked. You want to avoid digging in those areas to prevent damage to those utilities. And so, as many people have found, planting a tree by just digging a hole and popping the tree's root ball in there doesn't always work. And a lot of the times, the reason for that is because the hole is just not dug big enough for the root ball. And so what happens is the roots of that tree are immediately faced with the need to penetrate that hard clay soil that we have here in the greater Houston area. And so the tree stagnates, it doesn't seem to grow much at all. And you may even have some decline and eventual death of that tree. Most trees will actually do really well in poor soil if they're just given some help in acclimating to the environment that they're put in. So Some of the mistakes that I have seen is that people dig really large accommodating holes, but then they backfill that hole with sphagnum peat moss or humus or mulch or even a really fluffy potting soil. And what happens when you do that is that it leads to an area that is continually just too wet. And when that hole is too wet, your root system can't breathe. It can't take up the proper amount of oxygen and nutrients. Your tree ends up yellowing and then dies. And so the idea behind this is to help the tree just properly adjust to the existing soil conditions that you have. So for example, if the tree container that you bought from the nursery, if you bring that home and it is 10 inches across and say 10 inches deep, you are going to need a hole 20 inches across and about 15 inches deep. So as you dig that hole, throw that same soil, throw it onto a drop cloth or a tarp as you dig, because you're going to use that same soil to backfill in your hole once you get that tree planted. And so again, the size of the hole really does matter. You want that hole at least 2 times wider than the root ball and about 1.5 times as deep as the root ball's height. So what we like to say in horticulture is that you want to dig a $10 hole for a $1 plant, which means the hole for that root ball should be much bigger than what you can barely squeeze into it. The hole should be generous, and that requires a little bit of work. But look at it this way: the tree that you really wanted to grow in your backyard or front yard, it's probably going to cost you a little bit more than the other plants or shrubs that you purchased for your property, but it will likely outlast you in longevity. It will become large and valuable to your property in time. And so these are all some good reasons to give it the time and effort to plant it the right way and have a really nice large hole for its roots. So a little pro tip or little hack: when you're digging this hole, you want to use a shovel and not a post hole digger. The shovel allows you to kind of scuff up the sides of your hole, making sure that you have really good aeration and ease of movement for those roots when they begin to grow. So you want to simply take that sharp edge of the shovel and chip into the sides of the hole, kind of rough it up and create some horizontal lines in there. Think of it as a good benefit to the tree, and it allows for the water to escape and basically in that bowl of clay that we've just created for the hole. And the purpose of loosening that soil in a wide planting hole is just to minimize the resistance to the growing roots, to what they encounter in our compact, what can be sometimes compacted hard clay soil. And again, to make sure that that tree is getting oxygen and nutrients, and they're readily available in that root zone for them. All right. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, but once your hole is dug, you are going to want to perform a percolation test. This test will tell you how well your soil drains. And it's important to run this test in multiple locations within your yard, just so that you have some comparison. Parts of your yard may be better suited for drainage. So you want to dig a straight-sided, flat-bottomed hole about 12 inches deep. You want to fill that hole with water and then let it drain completely. And then fill the hole with water again and place a measuring stick in the hole, or yardstick or something like that. And you want to check the water level every hour and write down those levels. So if your water level drops less than 1/2 inch per hour, the soil is poorly drained. If it drains at a rate of about 1 to 2 inches per hour, that means you've got some pretty good drainage. More than 3 inches per hour is draining too fast, and that location, that area is going to need to be watered much more frequently than it needs to be. So you may want to consider a different spot. Now, once you've got your hole dug and you've done your percolation test, you are going to take your tree out of the container that it came in, and you really want to take a close look at those roots. If you have circling roots, those can really cause a plant to decline. You see that those roots are circling around the container, that's something that you really want to notice. And those circling or girdling root systems, those start in the nursery when the plants they've grown too large for the container size, or they've been kept for too long in the pot. Those roots start growing, they hit the edge of the container and start circling, or they'll hit the edge of the container and dive down. And so both of those can cause the root mass to be really dense, and it prevents the roots from being able to penetrate into the landscape soil after planting, just like we've been talking about. Those roots need to be able to, again, they've got to do what? They've got to take up that moisture and nutrients and oxygen to create a beautiful, healthy tree. And so those circling roots can, like I said, can kill a plant as it grows, and really cause some stress and decline. And you may not see that for several months. You may not see really any observable damage, and it may take, years before actual death occurs. But a lot of times it's from these circling or girdling roots. And so make sure that you look at those at the time that you're planting it. The root removal can stress the tree somewhat, but that's only going to last for a short amount of time, and it will decrease with the time as the tree recovers from the loss of those roots. And if you leave that root defect in place, it can actually increase the stress of the tree. The University of Florida has done some research that has shown that 25% of the roots can actually be removed without impacting the appearance of the tree. So if you do have a tree that has those circling or girdling roots, you want to eliminate that by cutting the roots at planting. Right then, before you put it in the ground, get that taken care of. Remove some of the soil from around the base of the trunk so that you can see the root flare of the tree. And then you want to make some clean pruning cuts back to the lateral root if that's practical. Cut the roots at the point where they begin to circle so that new roots will grow from that cut, and they'll point away from the trunk. They'll grow out. And so there are certain species like magnolia, maple, holly, and others that can appear especially sensitive to this root defect. So watch that. But really, any tree can be affected by those circling or girdling roots. And you want to remove that so that you can have good tree health. The research has shown that it's best to sever these roots with a sharp utility knife or a handsaw, or even a really sharp spade. And just even shaving the sides of like a container grown root system with a handsaw works well. And again, it won't really hurt the plant, it won't hurt the trees. Studies have shown that the roots that cut regenerate quickly, and they grow into the landscape soil and really help that plant to get established and be able to survive dry spells and drought. All right, so this next slide shows you that it's important to plant the tree level with the soil line. And so the purpose of planting a root ball on undisturbed soil is to prevent the root collar from sinking below the surface when the loosened soil settles. Remember that the roots of a tree go out to about 1.5 times the diameter of the canopy, and you want to keep that root flare above the ground. This picture on our slide here is another one from our Texas A&M Forest Service website. And it's a really great graphic with lots of great details on how to plant your tree properly. It's a lot of the same things that we've been talking about in this presentation. And so again, keep that root flare above the ground. We're going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. I'll tell you why. And then you want to center that tree in the hole and fill in around the root ball, kind of tamping it down as you go. Remember, you're going to be using that same native soil that you dug out of the ground. And don't worry too much about compacting the area. Just use that same native soil that you dug out of the ground, and tamp that down around the base of the tree. So we talked a little bit, I mentioned about the root flare of the tree. And so one little nugget of good information when you're planting a tree is to remember to bear the flare. You want to show that flare. So we don't want our trees to look like electricity poles, straight up and down, kind of like a electricity pole. You want to bear the flare when planting your trees. So what is a flare? The root flare is the bulge between the stem and the roots. So be careful not to confuse it with a graft. If you're familiar with fruit trees, a lot of fruit trees have grafts on them. Don't confuse it with that. It's important when you plant those trees to make sure that that root flare is at or above the soil line. You can see the graphic there, and see how they planted that tree and how that root flare is shown. Sometimes after I give presentations like this, I'll kind of joke to people. Now, when you drive up and down your neighborhood, or up, around your neighborhood or up and down your street, you'll notice now which trees have been planted properly, because you'll be able to see the root flare on the trees. And if they've been planted too deeply, they'll kind of look like, telephone poles or electricity poles. But it really is important to make sure that that root flare is at or above the soil line. If you do plant them too deep, it can cause quite a number of problems. Again, we've touched on this several times. You'll have reduced water and oxygen to the tree's roots, reduced access to nutrients. Planting too deep can also increase fungal and insect infestation, and it can have potential root girdling. So it's also important to know that not all trees show that distinct curve, that root flare, when they enter the soil, and that's okay. And that's quite natural, actually. The root flare, just remember, is the place where the topmost root emerges from the trunk. And again, you can always access that website and have a look at the proper way to plant trees. All right, so now it's time to water in your tree, and you want to make sure that there are no air pockets in your soil. And so having a hose nearby or access to some type of irrigation is important. And you want to flood that partially filled hole with slow running water. And so the reason for that is because if this was a container tree from a nursery, they water these trees every day. And the reason they do that is because a lot of these trees are planted in a soil-less media, meaning there's no soil in that container. It's got perlite and pine bark mulch, and those type of media drain really quickly. And when they drain really quickly, it means that they dry out quickly. So these trees have been used to being watered every day. And what that means for you is that these roots are going to need plenty of water in the following weeks and months to prevent them from drying out. So this, flooding this hole with water, making sure that it's really quite moist in there is going to give your tree a good start. In fact, you most likely need to water about once a week for the first year of the tree's life. And then as the tree's roots start to kind of acclimate to their new environment, they'll grow and get stronger and start being able to penetrate that harder clay soil that's that's so familiar to our Houston area. All right. Again, there's you want to add back that same native soil that you dug out of your hole. If for some reason you're needing more soil or you need some type of amendment to it, you can amend that with compost. There's no need for topsoil, potting soil, anything like that. You want that tree to grow in the same soil that is native to this area. Again, compost is fine as long as it's no more than about a third of what you put back into the hole. If you feel like your area of your lawn or landscape is just excessively clay ridden, you can before planting, ahead of time, use some expanded shale if you feel like that soil really needs it. Otherwise, just keep that native soil back in the planting hole. So it's also really important to make sure that you keep this area weed free so that the weeds don't take up nutrients and water from the tree. We don't want that type of competition. We want to give this tree the best type of success. And so you want to add 2 to 3 inches of mulch over the roots, and we don't want to put any mulch up against the tree. Again, if this tree, a lot of these landscape trees are going to be probably maybe in your front or backyard. And so it's important to not only keep the weeds away, but keep the turf away as well. Trees don't like turf, and turf doesn't like trees. It's kind of like the musical West Side Story and the battle between the Jets and the Sharks. And so it's important to keep that mulch around the ring of the tree so that we keep some of these things away from the base of the tree. Here's a really great picture of what your mulch should look like. You want your mulch to be shaped kind of like a donut and away from the tree. We don't want volcano mulches. We want a donut mulch. I know that you probably in your local shopping center have seen trees. I've seen them with like 12 inches of mulch up the trunk of the tree. And that is not the correct way to do it. The absolute only time that I would advocate putting that much mulch or soil up against the trunk of a tree is when we're banking soil or mulch to prevent freeze damage. And basically we're banking that up there to cover the graft of the tree. Otherwise, you want that mulch, shaped like a donut and away from the base of the tree, the trunk of the tree. So after Hurricane Beryl, there was a substantial amount of damage to trees and a need to replant what we lost. And when I get calls or emails in my office about recommendations of certain trees that people that they feel like they should plant, they always want something that grows really fast. And so it's important, though, to really think twice before you do that. A common saying that we have about planting new trees is grow fast, die young. And so many times trees that do grow fast or that have a rapid growth habit are also trees that have really weak limb structure. They're also susceptible to drought, disease, and pests, and therefore they can have a much shorter lifespan than trees with a slower growth pattern. And so there's on that same website that I was telling you about, texastreeplanting.tamu.edu, they actually have a custom tree selector where you can plug in the county that you live in, plug in Brazoria County, along with the specifications of the type of tree that you're looking for, whether small, medium, large. And what it does is it will populate with a selection of trees that not only do well in our area, but they also are suggesting ones that have moderate growth rate. And so that is actually a perfect segue for the last part of the presentation as we begin to wrap up. Um, and now that you've had your lesson in tree planting 101, now it's time to decide which type of tree that you want to purchase. And it's important to know and choose a tree that you know will do well in our area. And so here are my top 10 trees for Brazoria County. And really these will work in the greater Houston area as well if you're listening in from somewhere other than Brazoria County. So let me just give you a little bit of background for some of the slides that you're about to see. Some of these trees have a score on them, and let me explain what that is. Regional native tree species that are best for our county and again, the greater Houston area provide a couple things. And the first one is optimal carbon sequestration. They take carbon out of the air. They absorb air pollution. They absorb water, which is a type of flood mitigation. And they also reduce that urban heat island that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And so when you combine all of those things, it makes a combined score called a mitigation adaptation score, or a MA score. So you'll see that score on the slide for some of these trees. All right. So before I make like a tree and leaf, let me share my top 10 trees that grow well in Brazoria County. All right, number 1 is the American sycamore. Hopefully you aren't getting sycamore all my tree puns, because I believe that there are more in my presentation. Okay, enough of that. The sycamore, American sycamore, is considered the largest deciduous tree in North America. In Texas, they can actually grow up to 100 feet high and have a 4-foot trunk, and really spreading limbs that create like an oval or a round spreading crown. You can find sycamores along the streams and on rich bottomlands throughout eastern Texas, along the major rivers of the Edwards Plateau, and even southwest to Maverick County. American sycamore is used a lot as a landscape tree. It is a fast-growing and widely planted tree. It has really attractive bark and large yellow-green leaves. It can be susceptible to serious insect and disease problems. So that is something to keep in mind as you choose your tree. All right, number 2 is the bur oak. You may know, or you may not know, that oaks can actually be divided into 2 groups, and that's red oaks or white oaks. The acorns mature in 2 years in the red oak group, and the leaves usually have bristles on their tips. The acorns mature in 1 year on the white oak group, and those leaf margins are usually smooth. So that's how you tell them apart. So this bur oak is a white oak, and it's a large tree of the prairies. It reaches a height of about 80 feet or more and can have a trunk diameter of about 5 feet. It's got, a short body and heavy branches that form an open spreading crown with really dark green foliage. Some of the other oaks that you might want to take a look at besides the bur oak, in the white oak category, you can also look into a swamp chestnut oak, the white oak, the live oak, of course. I think we're all pretty familiar with that, and maybe even the lacy oak. If you are more interested in red oaks, you may take a look at the Shumard oak, the Nuttall, and the Texas red oak. So lots of great choices in the oak category. Number 3 is the American elm. These are native trees and they are really well suited to the Houston area, the cedar elm, especially. Oops. Okay, sorry about that. The cedar elm, especially, and really, it should be planted more widely in our area. It's tolerant of a wide range of growing conditions, including urban stress, and it has some interesting flaking bark. The true Chinese elm, is also another good elm tree. So this American elm that you're looking at is can get pretty tall, up to about 90 feet tall, and have a trunk diameter of about 3 feet. You can find this in a big section of the eastern United States. Um, and this American elm, as you can see, it's got some slight, yellowing in the fall, so you'll get a little bit of that fall color. And this particular species was actually a really common, like a street tree in America at the beginning of the 20th century. It was, however, almost wiped out by Dutch elm disease. So we're glad to still see it here. All right, number 4, the green ash. The green and white ash are also natives, and they also deserve a little bit more attention. They are really a long-lived tree with that good yellow fall color. Now, I will say Arizona ash is not recommended by Agrilife Extension. When you hear the phrase ash is trash, they're referring to Arizona ash trees and not the green and white ash trees that we have here in Texas. So stay away from those Arizona ash. The green ash is a large forest tree. It can get up to about 70 feet tall and have a 2-foot trunk diameter, really spreading branches and an oval crown. That leaf color is really dark green on the top and light green beneath it. And then it turns that beautiful yellow in the fall. So if that's something that is interesting to you, that's that aesthetic look, that fall color, that's another one to consider. All right, number 5, the red maple. Here is one maple that you won't want to leave behind. Hope that wasn't too sappy. This is one of the better fast-growing trees with flowers and seed that provide red color in early spring. Other Texas maples that have some good potential in Houston include the sugar maple, chalk maple, and big tooth maple. Now, if you see a silver maple, that is one that we do not recommend. Stay away from the silver maple. So this red maple is a medium-sized, fast-growing tree that can reach up to about 90 feet tall with a 2-foot trunk diameter, and has somewhat of a narrow, rounded crown. In the fall, the leaves turn a really beautiful shade of red. Some of the varieties even have like an orangish yellow shade to them. So another really good one for fall color. All right, number 6 is the river birch. The river birch is one of the few species that is tolerant to wet soils. It has that really attractive peeling bark, and the foliage cast a really nice light shade if that's something that you're looking for. This is about a medium-sized tree, can get up to about 40 feet tall, and it's got an oval crown, and the branches are usually drooping. The trunk of the tree are usually wrapped with peeling sheets of like a papery type bark. The upper surface of the leaf is usually dark green and shiny, and the lower surface is a little bit paler. All right, and I have forgotten to mention, but hopefully you're looking at some of the mitigation and adaptation scores, and this one scores an 81%. So really great tree for our urban areas. All right, number 7 is our chase tree. You probably know it as a vitex. This plant is usually a multi-trunk tree or a really big shrub. It's got bright purple flowers and aromatic foliage. The vitex does prefer well-drained soils, but it's actually very easy to grow. And so we would consider this a large shrub or a small landscape tree that gets up to about 15 feet tall. A lot of times it has multi-trunks. They can be twisted, and it's got a pretty large spreading crown. Again, it prefers that well-drained soil, really of any type of texture. And it does tolerate our heat and alkaline soils pretty well. And then, of course, it's got those beautiful flowers. There's actually a white flowered form that's available in the Vitex, as well as that dark purple variety, and that one's called Montrose Purple. So another really great choice. Number 8, the Chinese pistache. This tree has that really good yellow to red fall color. Most people pick a male tree when they're planting a Chinese pistache because of the large amounts of messy fruit that the female tree produces. This would be considered a medium-sized landscape tree. It gets to about 40 feet tall and about 12 to 18 inches wide in diameter. That's got, again, that beautiful, brilliant fall color. The branch structure is a little irregular and sometimes can develop codominant limbs. So that's something to keep in mind. This is actually a Texas superstar tree. And so if you're not familiar with Texas superstars, this tree will have gone through rigorous testing and research and trials by Texas A&M Agrilife Extension and that research department. And after years and years of testing and passing rigorous tests, they decided it's Texas tough enough and make it a Texas superstar tree. So we know that it will do well in our Texas landscape. Number 9, we're getting there, almost done. That is the crepe myrtle. The crepe myrtle is it's a prominent feature in our summer landscapes. The fall colors, or excuse me, the flower colors include white, lavender, red, and near red colors and all that in between. There are also some dwarf species that are available. And so if you're not looking for a 20-foot tall or crepe myrtle, there are more dwarf species available where that it's more shaped like a shrub. These crepe myrtles are usually multi-trunked, and they've got smooth, muscular limbs. They can, like I said, get up to about 20 feet tall and even about 15 feet wide. So keep that in mind again as you're choosing a location for planting these types of trees. Again, lots of different really showy spikes of white, pink, red, or even purple flowers appear each summer. And so those are really prominent in our landscape. Do make sure that you are not guilty of crepe murder. And that's a common but incorrect method of pruning the entire top of the tree each winter. And we call that crepe murder, or also commonly referred to as the South's worst gardening crime. So please avoid this unspeakable violence and don't commit crepe murder in the winter with these trees. All right, number 10, the Southern Magnolia. This is a beautiful glossy foliage. It has huge fragrant flowers that makes this evergreen tree one of the most popular in the South. As a large forest or like a landscape tree, it can actually get up to 90 feet tall and have a 4-foot wide trunk. And so you'll find these in rich, moist, well-drained soils on the banks of rivers or swamps, especially in Southeast Texas. And it's really been widely cultivated as, an ornamental tree. It's got those thick, leathery, dark green and glossy leaves on top, and then that rusty, what they would call pubescent underneath the leaves. So really, it's a showstopper, very showy and can be very fragrant. And actually, magnolias are one of the oldest flowering plants. They're actually they extend back like 130 million years ago. So they've been around for quite a while. All right. Would you believe it? We are at the end of our presentation, and I've got some really good tree resources for you to keep you in the know. So on the screen there, you can see the website treesaregood.org. This is an international website. Once you go to this site, it will help you not only to have some good tree resources, but I use this website to give to clients as a source for finding local arborists. If you enter in I think it asks for your state and maybe county and zip code, and it will populate for you local arborists in your area. If you are ever in the need or have questions or need a consultation on your trees, you can find a local arborist with good credentials. We talked about this website as well quite a number of times, the Texas Forest Service website. That's another one that has really great photos and being in tree planning, pre-planning those trees that you're going to plant. Lots of good information there. Aggie Horticulture, that website has lots of great information on trees, especially fruit trees. We didn't cover those in this particular presentation, but if you're a fan of fruit trees, lots of great information on every single type of fruit tree you can imagine that grows well in in Texas. And then finally, this is our local county website, brazoria.agrilife.org/horticulture. We've got a couple of great tree resources on there as well. We have our fruit and citrus tree planting guide on there. And I am busy working on a tree planting guide for Brazoria County as well that will have lots of good information. Not quite up yet, but keep watching our website and hope to get that up here before too long. So with that, I know that I'm pretty much at the end of my time here. And so remember that the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago, but the next best time is now. So get to planting, do your research, and make sure that you plant that tree properly now that you've listened in on our tree planting 101 and you have some good choices to choose from. And I wish you the best of luck in planting those trees. And so I will end my presentation now. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Emily, and we'll close out our presentation. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. I hope you enjoyed it.
Okay, let me see if we have any questions in the chat. I'm not seeing anything right now,
Okay.
but I just want to say thank you so much, Kimberly, for sharing your tree knowledge with us tonight.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you have a moment, please fill out our survey in the comments so we can see what kind of garden topics you're interested in learning about. That really helps us out to plan for next year. And then I just wanted to invite our viewers to join us at our 20th Plant Time Luncheon, November 1st at First Church in Pearland. Tickets are available on our website, pearlandrecycles.com, or our Facebook event page for the Plant Time Luncheon. You can get the event page will take you to the Eventbrite to get your ticket. And thank you again for joining us, and catch us in October, same time, for our next lecture covering fall native flowers for the garden with Stephen Bruderholm. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.